Hello, everyone. This is Floxcat, and welcome back to another episode of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series review. Yeah, sorry it took a while. It took a while for reading, but I did got done reading the second book, and yeah, today we'll be talking about the second book, Rodrick Rules. The second book to come out after the first book, and definitely one of the more intriguing books to say the least, especially for me, because this is one of the two first Diary Kid books I ever read, the other being Dog Days. And of course, nowadays I have all the books and stuff, so it's pretty good to look through all these. And Raw Rules was pretty much the second follow up to the Diary Kid series. And as the name supplies, it's a double meaning, being that not only that Roderick he thinks he rules the world, but also his rules. I'll explain a bit. So, for those who don't know, the second book's plot is very interesting as it gets into more details. It takes place right after this summer vacation. It is technically the only time so far in the series that they skipped the summer vacation. Though later on, thanks to the introduction of Dog Days, they kind of do continue the whole thing. In the book, Rodrick knows about a secret during the summer, which I actually won't spoil for those who do want to read this book. I will spoil some aspects, but I won't spoil that because it's very interesting. And throughout the school, this or half of the school year, um, Greg has to deal with not only Roderick's own torture, him holding that against to him, but later on, the major plot is them trying to hide the party that they, or at least Roderick had during when their parents was out. Basically, that's actually a two major point of plots, and there's definitely other parts to go into, but that is the main story. The story is not only tackling the issue of Roderick, but we finally get more characteristics of the other characters of Greg's family, and we get more info about that. So first things first. As for the story itself, as usual, the story isn't as bad as the previous um story of Wimpy Kid, because Greg is still a little bit of a jerk, and he's still going to be throughout the series. Just get ready; it's just getting started. But this is one of the few books that kind of don't make him less as a jerk and more just a guy who's trying to get through school. To be honest, when you first see the book, you also could tell, especially the cover, that you can tell the theming. But in actuality, the whole situation is the book just kind of shows them trying to take a balance and stuff, like how they're just brothers. They do help each other out. That's kind of what makes this book entry so interesting, as it shows that the brother relationship between Roderick and Greg is not perfect, but they are trying to get forward to. Sure, it's like what you expect for older and younger siblings, but it's what you expect. Now, like I said, the book is also more focused on Greg's home life and trying to introduce more into his home life. It is where things get very interesting as we get some more details about his parents and, of course, his other brother, Manny, and, of course, Roderick, of course, but that's already been covered already a little bit in the previous book. But, of course, also being the main point. This is also where we get into more of that theory territory, where many people think that not only Greg is a little bit of a sociopath, but also his family is dysfunctional. Now, I don't think they are too dysfunctional, especially what I read throughout the book series. But this book is major because it does show at least how each one of them ain't perfect. This is the introduction of, which actually, while I was reading and now thinking about it, this is actually perfect to note. But this also has some red herrings for the next book that will be discussed next time, which is the third book being Last Straw, with the introduction of how Frank, aka Greg's father, acts in this book. But again, it more focuses on Roderick than him and Greg. But anyways, Frank is kind of interesting to say the least. He's more, he's kind of a odd one out. He doesn't mostly shine until the next book. But, then of course we get to Greg's mom, and it's what you expect to say the least, where we get more of her, as people call it, the Karen side, as she shows a little bit of stuff. There's even like one moment, probably the one hilarious moment that many people remember, especially they also see in the movie, where she tells Greg not to lie again, and then she broke that off because after what he's been doing and stuff. There's also the introduction of several characters. Like we get more background of Loaded Diaper. It's what you expect to say the least. We get into this book is kind of, to be honest, to say the least. If you want my opinion, I still love the book, but this book so far is a very interesting situation because looking back at it now, it's kind of a underwhelming sequel to Die Wimpy Kid, because in Die Wimpy Kid, it had a little bit more oomph to it, to say the least, and showing some unique stuff. And don't get me wrong, the series is like a roller coaster. It has literally great moments and stuff. This is probably one of those few books that didn't really have too much going for it. It was just trying to introduce more of the background. There are some cool stuff in the book, though, to say the least. Like, there's a moment where they're made a reference to Dungeons and Dragons, which is pretty interesting and stuff, to say the least. Then they talk about, probably one of the most, like I said, I won't spoil anything, but this is probably the most disturbing image. Like, this is probably the most disturbing image yet after seeing it. Hold on. And stuff. This is the most disturbing image yet, as you can see. And I'm definitely going to hint that. Like, really. And for those who don't get the context, that's because Manny saw a horror movie and, that's what's going to happen. Definitely very interesting, to say the least. But there's also some other plots I'm kind of looking through here just in case. One interesting plot is the fact that, like I said, Greg is more calmer this time in this book. He does do some weird kind of bad stuff. Like the only major true bad thing he did, because the rest of it was just accidental coincidences, or something that happened. And now I'm thinking about it, there's actually two things he did bad. The second one wasn't, it was supposed to be a prank, but really it was kind of a very awful prank. But the first thing he did was Sharag, which we also get more details a little bit about Sharag. And people will remember in this book, Sharag gets picked on becoming the invisible Sharag thanks to Greg. However, over time, and it is actually different from the movie, of course, and I knew that, but over time, that led to the whole do not tell a lie thing, McGee. And of course, that what happen with that situation. It's very interesting, to say the least. I think that's another low point towards Greg that he did this, but he did made up with Sharag, to say the least. But it's very interesting, to say the least. And then the second thing he did was, like I said, it was a very terrible prank where he put a dumbbell in Raleigh's pillow and Raleigh kicked it. Again, it's a prank because you have to read the book. I'm not going to spoil too much details, but that led into it. And there's also some note that ties into the previous book, of course, being references to the Zoomy Mama. What's interesting is, and I don't know if this was changed during development of the book and stuff, but it's very unique considering that in the previous book, and mild spoilers to say the least, in the previous book, Greg's hinted that Raleigh ate the keys, and I say hinted because for some odd reason he censors eat and the keys thing. You have to look in the book, but you literally censor it for some reason, even though that's not curse words, because the whole keys touch thing. But in this book, they literally drop that and be like, yeah, yeah, Riley did eat it. No big deal, blah blah blah. Which is very uniquely weird to me. We also get more of how Riley's parents don't like Greg in some ways, or most ways, because how he is. But very much pretty interesting to say the least. And there's still a lot more I can go into with this review, to say the least. Probably some points I will touch upon is it a good sequel to start off with? And I still think it is. There's some good moments, like probably the biggest moments. And I forgot one more thing. There was also a moment involving play money, and this is known as the mom books thing. It didn't work out, of course, but it's kind of funny how Greg was thinking about, how he can use those mom books forever and da da da, but later he screwed up and he lost all of them, including what he earned. The end of that, but it kind of shows things. There's a lot of things to go into this book, to say the least, but they're not a whole. Like, that's kind of the issue with this book, because looking back at it, and definitely read it now, there wasn't a whole lot that pulled me in to keep reading that much, to be honest. I mean, I still like the book. I think it's a good sequel, at least, to build up towards. But there was nothing majorly happening at that major point, other than the fact that, it's Riley versus. Not Riley, I mean Rodrick versus Greg. And I think that what makes the book very well, because it really does tackle the issue along with that, but very uniquely, I will say, not very perfectly, but there's also that talent show thing, but they didn't. I wish they expanded on a little bit more, but they didn't. Um, and the characterization of Roderick in this book is very unique because, well, yes, he comes out definitely as a jerk and stuff. He's also not trying to be rude or something, I think, is the best way to put it. I know, this is probably the most sloppiest review you ever heard with that. Because, trust me, Roderick is not a saint, let's just be honest. But there are some moments that, very unique. And many people think he's more smarter than many people come across on. I just think he's just, very interesting. Like, this book definitely helps pinpoint some of the problems in um Greg's own family, and there's other things as well to make uh things very unique. For example, Rowley in this book, he tries to be more close to uh Greg, and there's this one point, mild spoilers, but there's this one point where he tried to copy Greg, and then all of a sudden they got in the office the second time because people thought they were in a gang the way they did it. It is very unique. And to be honest, there, as you guys can probably see, I'm trying to grab straws here because I don't want this video to be short. This book is kind of actually more less eventful than one would expect. Like, I know what a lot of people are saying, well, Foxcat, you're kind of hiding the major spoilers here, but I kind of want to hide it because even then, even I would go into details of that spoilers. Like, I haven't went into the party yet, but, it's what you expect. It's like the movie. They found out later on, and, stuff happens. It's not as bad as how the movie portrays it, which is very interesting. But the major spoil or the main conflict wasn't even the party part. It was instead, Greg had to deal with the dirt that Rodrick had hanging over his head, and I don't want to spoil that because that is a very interesting thing that happened to him and stuff. But very interesting transition to the series, to say the least, because this is again the footnote of how things start to be more tame, to say the least, for Greg. But Greg is still somewhat jerky into this series. Like, there's tons of things he does say that makes him come out as a jerk, including some lying and all that. But all in all, yeah, this is probably more shorter than the previous review because there weren't really much going on other than those two major points, but even then they came in way late and stuff. But I will say one thing. The book did a really good job of introducing the characters, to say the least, of Greg's family, to be honest. I mean, we already been introduced them before, but now this book goes into more details on what make them so interesting. But of course, next time in this series, we'll be talking about probably one of the more intriguing books, to say the least, for at least for most people, including myself, being The Last Straw. But for now, that's kind of my review of Diary of a Kid, Roderick Rules. Let me know what you guys think if you want to. I mean, you don't have to. Yeah, this is Floxcat, and I'm snapping out of here. Bye.